So, trade packages and landing spots for Magic star Aaron Gordon. We're using the word star a little loosely, but his potential is certainly there. The interesting thing that I noted was, according to an Eastern Conference executive, that they were really trying to deal him before the deadline, but they weren't getting the assets back that they wanted. I wonder what would the Magic expect to get back for Aaron Gordon? Would they expect like a first-round pick and a good player? I guess it might depend on the team and the particular situation or whatever. But anyway, the Bleacher Report has, I believe, 4 suggestions for Gordon. So let's dive in. The first one is San Antonio. They did touch on a DeRozan for Gordon idea. So the thing that I think about the most, if Orlando was going to do this, and the obvious reason is, of course, they need more scoring, right? Is would they have a big drop-off defensively going from Gordon to DeRozan? I mean, I don't know. Steve Clifford, his defensive principles in some ways can kind of perform better than the actual talent that he's working with, I feel like. But even so, DeRozan is not a good defensive player, and Gordon, even on his worst day, is at least like okay, I would say. So that would be a fear. But we also should really be thinking about Gordon in San Antonio. That would be very exciting. Now, we don't know how much longer Popovich wants to be around, but that could be a really good environment for Gordon to grow and develop. Now, one thing to say, though, is San Antonio doesn't have a great offensive player for Gordon to play off of, and maybe that's what he would really need in order to go to another level as a player. But even so, I think Popovich could do a lot of stuff, or whoever Pop would give the team over to could do stuff in terms of having Gordon set screens and hopefully the floor just being more spaced. I will say right now, if Gordon ended up in San Antonio, I mean, they're shooting... It depends. I mean, if you put Aldridge at center, you have Gordon at the 4, you have your 2 wing position guys be able to shoot. That probably makes up for the fact that DeJounte is not a real threat from outside, at least not yet. He is making a little bit of progress there. It could be interesting, although when I start to dive into the nitty-gritty, it's not as exciting as when I initially just think of Aaron Gordon on the Spurs. You know what I mean? But I would certainly like to see that more so than Gordon on Orlando, because we know how that looks. I do appreciate Bleacher Report giving my guy Jakob Poeltl a bit of a shout-out. Gordon and Poeltl, as well as DeJounte Murray, would give the Spurs a shot at a top 10 defense. Yeah, potentially. I mean, I don't know how good you would be on offense, because I think, if you're playing these two, you're probably not playing Aldridge, unless you want to try some Aaron Gordon at small forward. That could be something, but I don't know. The floor might be a little too clogged in that scenario. Okay, so the Minnesota Timberwolves are the next team. What does Bleacher Report think the trade would be? James Johnson to opt into his $60 million player option, he will. The flexibility of an expiring contract might entice Orlando. I mean, I've been saying, they do have an extra draft pick. I believe it's from Brooklyn. That could be the sweetener in the move if Orlando was a little stingier about trading Gordon. If it wasn't going to be that, then perhaps some second rounders or whatever. I mean, they say it here. Well, actually, they don't mention the Nets pick, but they've got it. It's lottery protected, and well, it's not a guarantee the Nets actually make the playoffs. but the earliest they could trade a first would be 2023. I don't think the Wolves should be dealing another first right now. From a basketball standpoint, thinking about D'Angelo Russell and Karl Anthony Towns and Aaron Gordon, I mean, the thing that I immediately think of is a bunch of horns plays where you've got Gordon and Towns on the elbows and D'Lo getting a screen from one of them, and then if it's Towns, you can kind of do a little bit of anything, really. I mean, you could have Towns pop, and then you could have Gordon cut to the rim. You could have, Gordon rolling, and then Towns spacing the floor out. We're not really talking about horns sets anymore. We're just talking basketball in general here. it does make sense in theory from an offensive standpoint, right? I think the D'Lo Gordon pick and roll could have some success. I think the more exciting thing is definitely D'Lo and Towns, with Gordon playing off of that. I guess the fear could be that Gordon's not a good enough shooter for that type of a thing, but I feel like if he's taking wide open threes, a lot of the time it'd be on the elbow or from the corner. He could have success there, and also it would give him a decent amount of opportunities for cutting to the basket as well. You know, like if you leave Gordon open a little bit and you got Towns who you got to deal with and D'Lo's threatening, and then you got Gordon cutting to the rim, like that could be tough to deal with, assuming the other two guys on the floor are not guys that you can just ignore completely. So I certainly get it there. If we talk about defense, I mean, the Wolves are going to need some defenders, and we've seen that Gordon can be good on that side of the floor. I think another interesting thing is seeing like Steve Clifford's influence on Gordon defensively and how he could bring that to another team, and the Minnesota certainly needs a bit of a defensive culture established, and I don't know if Gordon is a leader vocally like that to make that happen, but I think he could definitely contribute defensively. And multi-position guy, strong as hell, athletic as hell, as we all know. There's reason to believe that Aaron Gordon can keep improving defensively. Now, I guess the one question I would have is, even if Gordon stepped into Minnesota and was really good on defense, would it matter if Towns also didn't bring it defensively? I don't know. I mean, even with his defensive struggles, Towns has still been a positive for decent chunks of his career in terms of the on-off stuff. I'm not implying for a second that Towns has not been a very good player, but in terms of the lineup data and all that, you know what I mean. But yeah, Gordon in Minnesota, it'd be kind of interesting. It would certainly be interesting, and I think James Johnson's expiring with the Nets pick potentially could be enough to do it, but then, the Magic would have to be okay enough with not getting an exciting player back in return. Next up, the LA Clippers. Okay. There's probably like 5 different types of trades you could create here. See, Lou Williams, Patrick Beverley, or Zubats, who doesn't make sense with, yeah, that's true. Yeah, Beverley and Lou Will. I believe they mentioned this one before in a different article, and I kind of shot it down pretty quickly. Yeah, I mean, the idea would be if you just thought Lou Will was about to be over the hill, but I feel like for the Clippers, he certainly still has value. I mean, the guy averaged like 20 points a game this year or whatever it was, you know what I mean? Now, I know that as the Lou Will hater, I keep pointing out his shortcomings in the postseason, but I feel like for the sake of the Clippers, he's still very important, especially because, PG and Kawhi, you just might not want to rock the boat too much, but in terms of defensive versatility and having guys to play off of, it would certainly be exciting to think of Aaron Gordon with the Clippers. And now the Brooklyn Nets. Would Dinwiddie be in the move? Spencer Dinwiddie is on such a deal, and the Magic's desire for offense should make him appealing. With the big names providing more than enough scoring, Gordon could settle into a defense-first, playmaking-4 type of role. Yeah, the more athletic Draymond that I think I've said before or something. I don't know, would you do Dinwiddie and stuff for Aaron Gordon? I mean, I think Dinwiddie's a better player. I understand the concerns about fit, because Dinwiddie likes to have the ball, and you're not going to have the ball like that with Kyrie and KD. I mean, let's face it, with the injuries that Kyrie has faced, you're probably going to need Dinwiddie anyway. And the other stuff, though, I just think Dinwiddie's such a smart player, and I just feel like he'd find a way, even if he wouldn't be amazing from outside, and maybe he'd have a couple more possessions where the ball isn't in his hands. I still feel like he'd find a way. You know what I mean? I mean, I don't think it's crazy to just have Dinwiddie, Kyrie, and Kevin Durant out there. I mean, to me, the interesting one would be Karis LeVert. You do LeVert for Aaron Gordon. I think that one does have a little bit more of a chance, where I'm a little less confident in LeVert being able to play off of Dinwiddie, Kyrie, and KD. And for Orlando, it's like, well, we get ourselves a guard who at times has looked like a real scoring option, and the money pretty much still lines up. Now, Karras has had some injury stuff, and maybe that would be the thing holding you back if you're Orlando, but just, to me, I just feel like the Nets really like Dinwiddie, and I think they'd want to keep him. I think another thing that's interesting, actually, and this one's a little more under the radar, but would a sign and trade centered around Joe Harris for Aaron Gordon be ridiculous? Like, the Magic are really desperate for shooting. I think just going from Gordon to Joe Harris could do a lot of stuff for their spacing. Sure, it's not the shot creator like Dinwiddie or Karis LeVert could be, but I don't know, man. I wouldn't even rule out something like that.